Behind me is the Toyota Camry of Germany, and what I mean by that is, while it's a German luxury sedan, relative to the competition, it's sort of simple and reliable. Now it's under a tarp for a reason, and I'll reveal it in a second, but what I paid for this German Toyota Camry is $4,000. A Japanese Toyota Camry of the same year and mileage would cost $14,000 here in the US. The reason why it's under a tarp is because this car is technically flood salvage, though it wasn't actually in a flood. Rather, I think some water leaked in through the sunroof and caused some electrical system damage, which I'll have to fix in this video. The car? A Mercedes E-Class. In fact, go to any German taxi stand and it'll be full of E-Classes. So, what do the German taxi drivers know that we don't? Now, the auction listing did say that this car runs and drives. If we look inside, we can see that the carpet here on the driver's side is torn up. This is pretty common on cars that had water damage because maybe some water got in there. And it looks like they were messing around with this. And if I start it up, I get quite a few error messages on the dashboard. Look at all those. At least it does sound like it's running well. The big problem, however, is when I put it into gear, it does nothing. It doesn't go into drive, doesn't go into reverse. So to troubleshoot this, let's start by seeing if my scan tool here can communicate with the transmission, which it can, and see if it has any trouble codes. It's got quite a few trouble codes. They all seem to be communication related over CAN bus. And the transmission also has a separate module which controls the gear shifting, which I believe is this. Trouble codes. And these are also a bunch of communication related codes, and specifically this one right here, communication with the direct select lever. That is this lever right here, which is used to select the gear. And one last thing we'll check with the scan tool, the steering column control unit. That's basically the module that takes all the buttons from the steering wheel and also everything from the steering column, including the shift lever, and sends that to the rest of the vehicle. And it says here that it's not able to communicate with the control module, so that's a big hint. To get an idea of what's going on here, we need to look at a flow chart in the service manual. When you actuate the shift lever, the steering column control module sends a message to the engine control module over the CAN E bus. Next, the ECM sends a message to the transmission over the CAN C bus, at which point the transmission should select the appropriate gear. Now earlier, as shown by this diagnostic flowchart, when I used my scan tool to diagnose the transmission, I inadvertently verified that communication works from the CAN E bus to the ECM to the CAN C bus to the transmission. This gives me a fair degree of certainty that the steering column control module is the problem here. My new steering column module has come in, so let's get this installed. There are a lot of different variants of this, so hopefully it is the right one. Step 1 is to disconnect the battery, which I've already done, and step 2 is to take a screwdriver like this and poke it through this hole here, which will pierce the skin, and then there's a cable inside which needs to release the airbag right there. You can tell it's never been done before because there's no hole there. Got it. You can see the airbag is loose there on this side, and now I just have to do the one on the other side. Got it. One little connector in here, and that comes right out. We've got a 10mm hex in here, and make sure you hold the steering wheel when you do this so you don't break the steering wheel lock. Oh, I'm not quite getting enough leverage. Oh, there it is. There we go. Would you look at that? These both have the same part number, the same hardware number, and the same software number. So this is probably going to work. Okay, good and tight. Wow, that was easy. Okay, let's start her up and see if that fixed the issue. There may still be other issues, but the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. We still got warning messages. I might just have to clear some codes. Okay. Well, we're still not going into reverse or drive. So back to the drawing board. Can we communicate with the new module? And the answer would be no. So it is possible the new module could be bad just like the old one, but it seems very unlikely, and so I'm now going to do what I should have done to begin with, and that is check the wiring. I got the steering wheel off, and it only takes about 2 minutes once you know how to do it. And then under the carpet here, these are two CAN bus junctions. We have the green, which is the one we care about. This is for the CAN E. And then the brown wires here, which we don't currently care about. This is for the interior CAN, which is CAN B. So basically, I'm going to verify continuity of those two green wires there with this junction here. And I can use those unused pins in there to do it. Set the multimeter for testing continuity. If this beeps, we know it's good. Yep, that's good. So the other wire, yep, that one's good too. So CAN bus is not the problem. How about we try out this brown ground wire? That's good. And then the red power wire. For that, I'm going to reconnect the battery and see if we get 12 volts. I'm getting like 1.7 volts. So that's probably the problem. There's something wrong with this red wire. So here's the fuse box, and fuse 13 supplies power to that, which is one of the red ones right back here. So now to narrow down where the issue is, let's just double check the voltage here at the fuse. Oh, look at that. I'm getting 1.7 volts at the fuse. So the problem is probably somewhere here in this box. I want to check some other fuses here to try to isolate this. So this other fuse is also getting 1.7 volts. That's right next to that one. But right here, this one's getting almost 12 volts. How about over here? That's getting 12 volts. So it seems like the issue is isolated to this area of the fuse box. It sounds like I'm gonna have to remove this and take it apart and see what's wrong with it. All right, I got it out. Look at all of those electrical connectors in there. So I managed to pry this top cover off, and this is what's underneath. And of course I had to remove all the fuses and relays and stuff to get to it. Now, if you take a look inside, it's basically a multi-layer circuit board in here, except it's not a printed circuit board. It's layers of plastic like this. You can see a bunch of them in there. Those act as the insulators. And then underneath it, you can see some metal that conducts the electricity. So my goal here is to pry up this layer of plastic and then, well, as many layers of plastic as I need in order to see what's going on. Well, I got the first layer out here, and it's getting a little bit tricky to get additional layers out because these wires are in the way and they're connected to this other circuit board up here. So I looked at some wiring diagrams, and I'm starting to think this might not be the problem. Let me explain why. So I've identified this row up here. These are the pins that are not getting the voltage that I expect. And I figured that out by testing for continuity. Those are all connected together. And then the other thing I noticed is that there are multiple pins here supplying power to this board, but those ones are supplied by this right here. Now, if I test for continuity from that pin to these pins here, there's no resistance, perfect continuity. So that suggests that the problem is actually the voltage supplied to this module. And I believe that module gets power from this right here, which is the front pre-fuse box. And I believe this has fuses in it as well. So let's get this out and take a look at it. I got this unit out and it does not appear to be serviceable. So if it has any fuses or fusible links inside of it that blow, I think you probably have to replace the whole unit. And interestingly, the manufacture date of this is July of 2022, so this unit is fairly new. This lug right here is the one that supplies power to the circuit in question, and I will say that it was actually kind of loose, so that could be the problem. I tightened up the electrical connections on the pre-fuse box here so we can try it out and see if that fixes the issue or if I need to replace this. Okay, here we go. Running normally, still have some warning messages. See if it'll go into gear. Oh my goodness, it is in drive. And now it's in reverse. Can we actually move? Yes, we can. Car's a little bit frozen here because it's been here for months and it's winter and icy. Well, that is pretty remarkable that the issue was just a loose electrical connection. And I can guarantee that was not caused by water damage. That was caused by the mechanic who replaced that previously, and it may have been the dealer actually, didn't tighten it up properly, and eventually maybe it loosened up a little bit over time until it got to the point where it started causing electrical problems. Now, as for why this car is flood salvage, I don't know yet if there's anything wrong with it that was caused by water damage, and I'm not saying the previous owners committed insurance fraud. However, I think that these electrical issues were pre-existing, and then maybe some water leaked in conveniently and they were like, insurance, look what happened, and here we are. Since this car now runs in drives, let's get this in the shop so I have a more comfortable place to work on it while I try to figure out what else is wrong with it. As for these error messages, hopefully they'll go away once I clear some codes. The 4MATIC all-wheel drive should do a nice job of getting me up this little hill through the snow. A little tricky getting into my shop in this tight space. Well, after resetting the codes, the only light that's left on is the airbag light right here. And the code for that is actually for the pre-fuse box squib over there that I was messing with, and I probably caused that issue myself, so that should be a fairly easy fix. I want to start out by doing an oil change, so we'll get this drain plug here removed, and while that's draining, we'll take a look at the rest of the vehicle and see what else needs to be fixed. Well, the oil is pretty dark. I like to start by checking the suspension and the steering for tightness, and these seem pretty tight. The tires, though, look unevenly worn, so this might need an alignment. Actually, because the tires are worn on the inside and the outside edges, I wonder if maybe they were just underinflated. And then here on the back, that's also nice and tight, and the tires are not unevenly worn. And while I'm back here, the brakes have tons of life left. The brakes in the front have less than 50% life left, although I'd say it's not worth replacing yet unless I have to take these apart to access something else. Things in here are looking fairly decent for the most part, except the inner tie rod boot there is torn, so I'm going to have to replace that. The boot for this ball joint here is leaking, so I'm going to replace that whole link. And it's even worse on the other side. Things are looking pretty decent in the middle section here. There's a little bit of corrosion, but it's not too bad. And then in the back here, things are looking fairly ordinary. The CV boots are not torn, all the suspension looks good. Now that this is done draining, I got a brand new drain plug and gasket. And the torque spec on this is good and tight. So right about there. Okay, so noob YouTuber mistake. I just changed the oil filter. Look, here's the old one. And apparently I forgot to hit record, so yeah, sorry about that. Liquimoly 5W40 takes 7 liters of this. Okay, let's start her up so we can let the oil filter fill up and then check the level. I would imagine this dipstick back here is the oil level, which is great that it has a dipstick. And that level looks good. Next, I want to service the transmission fluid and filter. So I've got 10 liters of Liquimoly ATF. We got a new filter, new gasket, and I even have new bolts for the transmission fluid pan. These are actually made of aluminum, and so you're supposed to replace them. I was just about to start draining the fluid from this pan when I noticed all the corrosion around the drain plug. And this pan is made out of thin stamped steel, and so I'm worried that this might start leaking at some point in the future, in which case I think it's probably a good idea to replace this pan while I'm at it. While I'm waiting for that transmission fluid pan to come in, let's change the rear differential oil. It takes a 75W85, I think 1.2 liters, and because I'm sick of pumping it by hand, especially when it's this cold out, I bought a power fill fluid transfer pump, which should make the job a lot easier. These Mercedes differentials are pretty easy to do. There's a drain plug right there, and then over here on the other side, right up there, we have a fill plug. I'm going to start by loosening up the fill plug just to make sure I can. Well, that fluid looks really clean, but it kind of always does on a Mercedes. They must have a magnet inside the differential somewhere to collect metal filings. Now that that's done draining, let's tighten up this drain plug. All right, that should be tight enough. Get the fill plug the rest of the way out. So let's pop that in there. And now if I open this ball valve, it should start filling it with fluid. And then once the fluid starts coming out, I shut this valve off and put the fill plug back in. I think we're starting to come out, so we're full now. Yep. Now I feel like bleeding the brakes. It's just such a lovely warm evening out. It's probably like 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Remove this little strainer here. Step one is to pump as much fluid as I can out of this reservoir. It's not the worst looking fluid I've ever seen, but it looks like it's definitely time for a flush. And then the good old pressure bleeder here makes this an easy one-person job. I've already got it filled up with fresh brake fluid. And now I'll pump this up to about 15 psi. So I'm starting at the rear right corner, which is farthest from the brake master cylinder, and I'm going to bleed this until the fluid comes out fairly clear. Yeah, the fluid's really not that bad looking. Okay, the fluid in the hose here is looking pretty clear, so we're going to call this good. So just tighten this thing back up. Okay, that's one down and 3 more to go. Well, this is the last wheel. I've done all 4 so far, so the brakes are all bled. Well, my new fluid pan has come in, so let's get this transmission serviced. I think this is a 6mm hex, but it's really tight. There we go. Oh, I just got rust in my eye from this. This is like the darkest fluid I've ever seen inside a transmission. Now that we're down to a trickle, there's an overflow plug out here that I have to bang out. Use a little chisel to do that. There it is. And now the rest of the fluid will drain out. Because I want to drain as much fluid out as possible, I'm going to drain the torque converter through this inspection port. The problem is, because of the angle of the drain plug, there's no way I can get a normal hex socket on that. So instead I'm going to try one of these ball head sockets and see if we can get this to work. Despite the angle, it does fit in there. I have serious doubts that this is going to be able to handle the amount of torque required to get this drain plug loose. But we're going to try. Oh man, nope. No, that twists really easily. That is unfortunate. This is not a very good design, actually. And now removing the fluid pan is as simple as removing these 6 external torques. Pop the old filter off here. Before installing a new filter, always check and make sure the seal came out with the old filter. Just going to lubricate the seal for the new filter. This is a brand new OEM filter and it's dated 2024. We'll look at the date on the old filter to see if this has been done before. Pop this in place, like so. The date on the old filter is 2012 and the car is a 2013, so the fluid has almost certainly never been changed. So these magnets I have to clean up and transfer to the new pan. This one's clean and that one there is not cleaned yet, and it's not too bad looking. It's got some metal on it, but it's really not a lot. So this little thing here is how you set the correct level of the transmission fluid, and that one right there is what I had to punch out in order to get the fluid to drain. And so the new one we'll just install in the new pan. And with that, we got a brand new pan with clean magnets. This thing's ready to go. Also, can't forget the new bolts and the new gasket. The torque spec on this is 4 Newton meters plus 180 degrees. $180 degrees. Right there. That's not going anywhere. Well, I'm filling up my transmission fluid pump here with Liquimoly ATF TopTech 1900. And this stuff is even blue in color to match the factory ATF. So on a Mercedes 7-speed transmission, you fill it through the drain plug. And so I have an adapter here that screws into the drain plug. Just going to give this a little tighten to get it snug. Now I can pump up this transfer tank by hand. And we'll open this up. We'll put 7 liters in it and then see how full it is. Okay, we got some air coming through this, so the pump is out of fluid, so I'll close this ball valve. At this point, we can start it up. We'll go through all the gears here, put it in drive, put it in reverse. Might as well do neutral as well. And back into park. And what that does is it just fills up the valve body so we get the correct fluid level. Now we just need to wait for the transmission to get up to temperature, which is 45 degrees Celsius or 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, little by little, we're getting up to temperature. 100.4 degrees. We're waiting for 113 because this is in Fahrenheit. Once this gets up to temperature, I'm gonna have to move pretty quickly, and I'm gonna have to disconnect this. At that point, all the extra fluid in the transmission will come out. And then once it gets to a slight trickle, the level is correct, so I have to quickly reinsert the drain plug, and then we're done. All right, the temperature is correct. Okay, there it is. Drain plug back in. And now we'll tighten this up to good and tight. Which is probably right about there. Next, I want to do a coolant flush. And if you look inside, you can see that it's sort of like a yellowish, goldish color. So I think this is GO5 coolant, which is the old stuff. So this right here is the radiator. This is the drain valve, and this is the drain down there. Look how easy that is to access. This is gonna take a little while, but at least it's not messy. There's one more drain to get, and it's right there on the water pump. I had to remove the serpentine belt for access, so while I'm in here, let's check these pulleys and see if they're any good. I'm gonna remove this air filter housing to get better access in there, and it's sort of another while you're in there, but the air filter needs to be replaced anyway, so this will be good to do. Look at all this access I have on the side of the engine now. Like, that's my hand. This is amazing. And now back to checking these pulleys. Do you hear that bearing noise? It's not super loose or anything like that, but this is one of those things you don't want this to fail while you're driving, so it's better to replace this now. While I'm in here, there's a little bit of noise too on the alternator. It's not loose or anything, but I might replace this alternator too while I'm in here. The water pump sounds pretty good. Now over on the other side of the engine, that sounds pretty bad too. The idler pulley, that's pretty good. AC compressor is good. Yeah, it's a weird design, but it is draining coolant. And while that's draining, let's look inside the air filter housing. Ooh. Yeah, that's a little bit dirty. Time to replace it. Well, the old filter is a Mercedes-Benz made by MAN, and the new one here is a Hengst. Beautiful. And another thing that I noticed while I'm in here is that two of these camshaft solenoids are leaking. That one right there, and that one right there as well. Also, considering how I see oil coming out of this ground wire right here, this raises the question. The ECU is right here. Oh no, there's quite a bit of oil in there, so it looks like oil is leaking through the wiring harness, and hopefully it hasn't made it into the ECU yet, because it seems to be working, but I'm gonna have to clean that up. So I've got pretty much everything back together, just gotta throw this air filter housing back in. And now to fill the cooling system, I'm gonna use this blue G48, which should be compatible with the GO5 that's in it. Because I only drained the system and I didn't flush it out, there is gonna be some mixing, but this should be okay to mix based on my research. I'm just gonna mix 2 gallons of it up in this bucket here. And because that was a jug of concentrate, I'm gonna mix in 1 gallon of distilled water as well. I'm gonna use this nifty contraption to vacuum bleed the system. So first it uses compressed air here to create a vacuum, suck all the air out of the system. And then there's a hose here which goes down to my bucket of coolant, and it'll suck that coolant into the system. Let's open this. You can see the gauge measuring the vacuum. Why is it going back down? What's going on here? I wonder if I have enough compressed air. It's so cold out that I think there's water frozen in my compressed air lines, and it seems to really be limiting the flow of air. Well, I guess I'm just gonna have to do this the old-fashioned way, which is top it off now. I'm gonna have to run the engine a bunch of times and then keep topping it off as it bleeds the air out of the system on its own. Well, the level is full, so I'll go ahead and run it and top it off as needed, but that's basically how you drain and refill the coolant on this thing. All the parts I need have come in to work on the front of the engine. We got 2 pulleys, a belt, 2 camshaft solenoids to fix oil leaks, and then 4 camshaft position sensors also to fix oil leaks, and then a brand new alternator, Valio, made in Poland. And look at this, you'd expect this to be quality, but this shaft is seized. Rather than exchanging this for a new one, I'm thinking maybe I will take the old one apart and see if I can replace the bearings on it. I'm going to start by removing this alternator here, and you really do have good access with this V6 engine. I have an E12 external Torx here, and I'm going to start with the bolts on the bottom. I know you guys can't see them, but I can't see them either, so sorry about that. I think I'm getting it. I think I got it out. Oh yeah. Bolt number 1. Yeah, so I bought this snap-on swivel socket here, and it's more tight and precise than like your average Chinese-made swivel socket. I know snap-on tools are expensive, but in situations like this is worth the money for sure. And now it comes off by hand, slowly. So this lower bolt in the back here won't come out because of the subframe, so I'm gonna have to have that bolt in place when I reinstall the alternator. Next, we're gonna get this electrical connection. And with that, we've got the big positive cable off that goes to the battery. And now I saved the easy part for last with these 2 bolts. They're easy to access. Come on. Come on. There we go. That noise tells me that the bearings are failing inside this alternator, and this alternator costs over $1,000 from Mercedes. Now I have no idea if this is going to be repairable, but if I can take this apart and replace just the bearings, I'm fairly certain that I can buy replacement high quality bearings made in the US, Europe, or Japan for probably like $20 to $40 is my estimate. So that's way cheaper than replacing this alternator, which is otherwise fine. Before I go too far on this, just mark that so I know which way to put it back together. Well, just about any problem can be solved with a big enough hammer, so let's try this. Feels like it's coming off. Ooh. Fantastic. Okay, this is just a standard automotive bearing. It says it's made in Poland. Oh! You gotta love that. There it is. This bearing is much bigger than the other one. Okay, excellent. For finding replacement bearings, I find the best way to do this is to measure them. Sometimes you can see industry standard bearing numbers on the outside, but a lot of the time it's just proprietary markings. So for the big one, the outside diameter is 47 millimeters. Inside diameter is 17 millimeters, and then the width is 14 millimeters. For the little one, 35 millimeters, 15, and then the width is 11. Well, my bearings came in. They're SKF high precision bearings, and it cost around $50 for the 2 of them. Made in Italy. I'm going to keep my comments to myself on this one because if I ever go to Italy, I'm going to need a security detail. Some red Loctite is what I'm going to use to keep this in place. And then the smaller bearing goes in here. I think that'll just go in by hand. Pretty close. And now the middle bit, I think that's the correct technical term for this part of the alternator, goes right in here. Put a paint mark here and here, so I know it goes together like this. Okay, so it turns out I broke one of the brushes when I was installing this, and I didn't realize this module came off so easily, but I'm gonna see if I can find a replacement for this. Magically, a new one of these has showed up. The trick to getting these installed is to depress these brushes in like that so they fit down over this. And as it turns out, you can pop this housing off just a little bit and it'll hold the brushes in place. Okay, it spins nicely. Now, the big test of this alternator is going to be, does it actually work and charge the battery once I get it installed? It looks like we have oil leaking both from the camshaft position sensor and also from the camshaft adjuster solenoid. And because the seals are built in, I'm going to replace both of them. Let's start by disconnecting these electrical connectors. Is this going to be easy or difficult to remove? Easy. New solenoid. This car is so easy to work on. Another one that's easy to remove. I love it. Oh yeah, look at that. Oil definitely was leaking into this connector. Well, brand new sensor here. Plug that back in. And then I have a new zip tie here to secure this cable in place. I ended up getting all 4 of those camshaft position sensors replaced, but to get the 2 over here, this one and this one, I had to remove the sort of engine cover, which is also the intake manifold, to get access. Let's get these idler pulleys changed. Nice new idler pulley. Okay, beautiful. Looks good. Okay, that's a really easy job. All the oil in this engine ECU connector needs to be cleaned out. Look at that. And this is what I picked up to do the job. Next, I want to change the spark plugs, which I think is the last sort of while you're in there item to get. You have pretty good access to these. We get the ignition coils right there, and then the spark plugs go in right underneath. Got a pair of pliers for this. Okay, it came off intact. Okay, spark plug. Well, it's got a Mercedes logo on it, and with the car having less than 120,000 miles, this might be the original spark plug. I'm replacing these with Bosch Iridium plugs, and I also got some spark plug boots as well, because these tend to break easily when you remove them. And then we torque this down to 23 Newton meters. These boots have a new design, apparently. Easy as pie, 1 down, 5 to go. Once I was done installing spark plugs, it was time to reassemble the entire front and top of the engine. The intake manifold was really the only tricky part here. Well, I got everything back together, and in this repair, I changed and touched a lot of different parts, so we definitely want to start this up and make sure everything works, including the alternator, which we will measure the battery voltage when it's running. I actually measured it beforehand, and the battery was down to 7 volts, so I have it charging right now, so hopefully this thing starts. Let's start her up. Very good. Let's measure the battery voltage now. And we're getting 14.6 volts, so that means that the alternator is working. I decided I'm going to slap some brake pads on this. These are some nice ceramic pads. And look at that, made in USA. That's a pleasant surprise. These brake pads are really easy to change, but removing this clip here might be the trickiest part. Ow, my thumb! Is there some sort of a trick to this? Like that. There we go. Unplug this wear sensor. You know, it looks like it was really close to triggering this sensor, so I'm actually really glad that I'm replacing these pads. Prying on this is just going to push the piston in a little bit, which will make it easier to get this off. Oh, look at that. That's a lot easier. Ooh. I left this pad in so I can use a C-clamp to push the piston in. When you're doing this, the piston should go in somewhat smoothly. If it doesn't, you'll need to replace the caliper. I find that OEM calipers usually last a really long time, but if you buy cheap aftermarket ones made in China, they fail so quickly. Don't replace a caliper unless you really need to replace it. The factory manual says not to use any brake parts lubricant on this, and it also says there's an arrow indicating the direction of travel on the pads, but these aftermarket pads do not have an arrow. And of course, don't forget to install your new brake pad wear sensor. Next, let's replace this sway bar end link with the broken boot. And the new one, it says Miley HD, but it looks a lot more cheaply made than the original Mercedes one. Next, I want to replace this torn boot. This is so I can try to maintain the alignment. Oh, I might get lucky and be able to reuse this clamp, actually. Oh, that is on there really tight. Oh, that comes off easy now. Still seems nice and tight. $10, $11, $12. So it looks like I need to come in one more rotation. Okay, so right there. I forgot to put this clamp on this. Darn it. Okay, I'm probably just going to do a regular hose clamp on that, which will be fine. I think this one should work. Tighten it up. Cool. That's not going anywhere. While I have these wheels off, I want to look into why this car was leaking water, and I suspect it is from the sunroof, and the front drains for the sunroof. The water drains down here, and it comes out behind the wheel liner there. And if we look in the sunroof here, you can see in the corner there is a little hole where water is supposed to drain out, and there's one in each corner. Now the test here is to pour some water in here and see if it comes out. If it's draining at all, it's not draining very fast. And I'm not seeing any water leak down here, so I think we have clogged sunroof drains. And while we're at it, let's also check the other corner. And we got a little bit of water coming out here. Actually, there's a lot of water coming out here, so it seems like the other side is probably the issue. So right in here, and you can see it right back there. That's it, the drain. So if I take a screwdriver in here, I bet a bunch of water will come out. No, maybe it already leaked out slowly. Yeah, if you look inside there, you can see there's a bunch of like dirt and organic material. I built a little hook that I could sort of stick in there, loosen things up, and pull clumps out. And I've also been spraying Simple Green and hot water down here through the drain hole, and everything's coming out pretty clean now. And there it is, coming out right away. And then I also did the passenger side too. It was not as dirty, but it did have some gunk in there. So why is this car so commonly used as a taxi in Germany and frankly in a lot of other countries in Europe as well? For one, public transportation is a lot more common in Europe than it is in the US, and as such, taxis end up being more of a luxury than they are here in the US, and so the cars are suitably more luxurious. As for why this car is so suitable for use as a taxi, all we have to do is look at the competition. I mean, BMW, everybody knows that BMW has a terrible reputation for reliability. As for Audi, I've owned a lot of Audis over the years, and I certainly wouldn't recommend it. And then what else do we have left? Jaguar? I mean, they'd have to be absolutely crazy to use one of those. Mercedes reliability is sort of hit or miss depending on the model and the engine, but this model and this engine in particular, I think is a lot more reliable than average. The 3.5-liter V6 engine that this car has, which is the base model engine here in the US, is sort of simple and easy to work on, which will reduce overall ownership costs. And then the rest of the car is also fairly simple. It doesn't have anything crazy like air suspension, which can be notoriously unreliable. As for why the E-Class itself is so good for use as a taxi, you get the refinement of a Mercedes, but the inside is really spacious and comfortable. On 2 separate occasions, I've driven these W212 E350s on cross-country road trips, one of which I put about 8,000 miles on the car and returned it well overdue for an oil change. But overall, it was a really, really good car for that type of a road trip. So anyway, I think we can chalk this up as another successful salvage auction purchase. Now, I have a lot of really fun projects lined up for the channel this year, so I hope that I will see you guys in the next video, and thank you so much for watching.